Hello everyone, in this video we're going to check out how I make some mesh tanks. Welcome to MJ Hobby Corner, everyone. I'm MJ. I'll be your host in this video. And for today, what I would like to do is show you the very basics of how I make one of these tanks. And these are the larger scale, roughly around 15 millimeter. I'm using them with my 15 millimeter little metallic soldiers. And so we're going to look at this, and then we'll take a look at some smaller scale stuff as well. First things first, if you want to help support the channel, I do have a Scratch Builder monthly issue dedicated just to these builds, and this video will be a sort of companion video to that document, and that is on Wargames Vault. I want to give a special thanks to all our supporters on Patreon, here on YouTube, and of course on Wargames Vault as well. Thank you very much. The magazine has been very successful, and I'm very happy about that. So thank you guys for supporting that part of my work. All right, well, there's a lot to do, so why don't we just get right to the craft table, and we'll begin the whole of this project. So these are my primary tools for building anything in mesh, and this is true of the tanks as well as some of the 6 millimeter mesh armies that you've seen. A set of pliers, preferably a needle nose, some kind of tweezer, and I have that bent tweezer as well as these cuticle tweezers, and I find these to be most useful. So tweezers, a pair of scissors works really well for cutting mesh, and also we will need an X-Acto knife. Some cuts on the mesh would require an X-Acto knife instead of the scissor. And last but not least, these clips. These are excellent for applying pressure to the builds, and I found this to really increase the success that I have getting the plastic mesh to glue together. Okay, so some kind of tool that will help you apply pressure. These apply a lot of pressure, nice even pressure on the builds. Okay, so it could be alligator clips, could be anything really that you have available. So those are the primary tools. For my primary adhesives, I'm using Loctite super glue. I'm going to be very honest, I don't like this glue very much. It's been working well with tacking glue. You mix a little drop of each on the surface that is going to be glued together, and that does work very well. Now I will be trying a new Gorilla Glue. This is no foam glue, and it is clear. It's a crafting bond. So I'm going to be trying this, and I will report on this in the next Scratch Builder to see if it really works the way I would like it to work. So we'll see about that. And then there is hot glue. I still use hot glue mainly for the larger parts of the hull. Once you get to the smaller parts, then I switch over to my other glues. Dremel or drill is an optional tool. You can get away without using a Dremel, but it's been very useful. And even during some filing procedures where I use a thin filing bit to file away or shape away some edges that during the layering process may stick out a little. Okay, so some kind of filing paper or file would definitely be helpful if you have one available. That's certainly something, maybe some filing paper. And the plastic canvas, I get them in packs of 6, and these are 10.5 by 13.5 sheets. Okay, so this is the primary building material. And then we're going to need, for this particular project, and for many of these mesh projects that I do, some index cards. And I chose index cards for many reasons. But it is possible to skin these vehicles with the cereal thickness cardboard that you see in, in cereal boxes. However, that cardboard, it is very thick, difficult to bend, and I find it not as simple to use as the index cards. Okay. Now there are a bunch of optional materials for adding details. I write these up in the document. I list them. Basically, electrical wire is very useful, and we have these beads. These are for making bracelets or necklaces. These I have used these quite extensively to represent wheels on tanks and on other vehicles. So I really like using these. They're about $4.50 at Walmart. You can probably find them in other craft stores. And there's also glass beads. Now this is definitely optional, but I have found it very useful, as you will see, for a lot of the details that I apply to the tanks, and especially for like little range finder cameras and things like that. They're definitely very useful. Cable ties and the remnants of cable ties I use extensively as well for detailing. You can see the cable tie pieces right there. Okay. And so if you have that, and these are especially useful for the tiny tanks. These beads are what I use to detail the smaller scaled vehicles and to make the wheels for smaller scaled vehicles. So glass seeds, it's an investment. This is about $10. So this will increase the budget, the price of the project, but you use very, very little of these at a time with each project. So these should last a very long time. So here are the parts list for the tank, the example for the tank. Now this bottom row here represents the turret. This top row represents the hull itself. So we're going to build only the hull, because I feel that once you build this, you can really just build one of these hulls and then build several different turrets and basically just interchange the turrets to make a different vehicle, basically. So I think the hull is central to understanding the way that this mesh works. Okay, so I'm going to take the top of the hull, which is this H shape here, and if you want to modify the hull, maybe make it wider. I actually do think this one's a little too thin. You can add lines of squares here, and you'll get a much wider vehicle. Okay, so these do need to be a little wider. But the first thing I do is I place my H shape right at the edge of an index card piece. All right, with the mud guards facing one edge and the full length of the hull at the edge of the card here, and then glue this. I'm going to use a little bit of white glue. I find that white glue works very well when skinning the vehicle. So I filled my hull here with glue. Make sure that every area is covered with glue, and I just used a Q-tip to kind of spread around. You can use whatever you want. You can use your fingers. However, one thing, and I use my fingers all the time, but one thing, if you're using a little bit of super glue, then I would recommend you use some kind of spreader. Anything will do, a stick, anything you have will do. You definitely want to wash your fingers from any glue residue, because that's going to screw up your building process. If your fingers are completely sticky, and believe me, it's happened to me, it will definitely affect your building process. So I'm going to add a little bit of super glue, just a couple of drops in some areas, particularly around the edges here. And just a little bit there, just around the edges to really secure the edges. And now I'm going to glue it to my index card. So now I want to apply pressure on this, so I'm going to carefully cut, okay? And just cut around. I'm not going to cut in the center of the H. I use the X-Acto blade to cut the center of the edge of the center of the hole here. I'll use an X-Acto blade for that. That's a much better cutting tool for that purpose. One very important thing is when you cut your H, you want to make sure you don't have little knobby ends here, right? That's another disadvantage of the grid. You will have to clean up your edges, and the X-Acto blade is the best tool for that, I find, okay? So the scissor gets you, really quickly cuts your piece, but you want to make sure that your edges are also trim. So if you just want to use the X-Acto blade, that's up to you. I like to use the scissors because putting pressure, my hands hurt a lot due to medical condition, and that pain, you know, cutting with the X-Acto blade, if I can not have to do it constantly, you know, it helps. So now I'm putting pressure just on the edges, and I'm just going to stand this up right there. So that's the top of the hull. This is the bottom of the hull. So if we look at the tank here, it's this part right here. It's the center of the hull, which goes right under that H, and it's just a little bit wider here. It goes into the mud guard a little bit. Okay, so this is the center. Now, if you want a wider vehicle, obviously you're going to make this H wider. You're going to add more lines of squares lengthwise, which means you would have to modify this piece as well. So we're just counting on the grid and cutting your shapes, you know, that way. So while that dries, the top hull dries, I'm going to begin layering the bottom of the hull. Now, layering, all it is basically cutting out a variety of shapes, sandwiching them together to get the appropriate thickness that you need for a part. Now, this bottom requires 5 of these rectangular pieces. Layering works with the smaller scales. Once you start building with larger vehicles, layering begins to fall apart because you're going to need so many layers just to get the appropriate thicknesses for a larger model. Okay, so I find that layering works best on smaller models. Okay, so my rectangle is layered, and you'll see that there's a little bit of unevenness there. That's where you can file a bit, okay? But really, when I skin that, that's not really gonna matter. So we need to let this dry now. My hands are a little bit sticky. I'm gonna go wash my hands now. Okay, here's my lovely glue. And I think I'm not gonna add crazy glue to this part of the skin. I don't always do that. I'm not always consistent with adding the crazy glue. For the smaller parts, I do, because I think the super glue is really good when trying to glue very small parts. Once the skin is dry, then we can add layer number 2, and that creates the base of the turret. Okay, so we're going to put this aside. Okay, so the top of the hull has been cut, and I recommend the X-Acto blade for these kinds of cuts. And I also use a little bit of filing paper just to make sure that the edges of the index card are straight. And of course, any little knobby ends on the plastic here that are left behind from cutting the grid, those have to be trimmed with the X-Acto blade. So that's, again, I'm just emphasizing that. So this is the cheapest and fastest way to get a track. I recommend using the X-Acto blade to cut these lengths, And then once I cut one of an appropriate size, I use it as a template for the other. Now, this is actually thicker. Notice how thick this is. So I'm actually going to trim this track a little bit because I added some thin track to this. I want to keep it that thin, okay? All right, so this is an example of one of the tracks, and this is one of several different track designs using the mesh. These edges here can be trimmed, or they can be left as like the extra links there. I have not perfected this yet, but when I'm ready to add some information on this, I will have a free document that talks about making your own tracks. But there are a lot of different ways to make the tracks, and the builder has to decide what way they want to use to go the easy way, which is using the corrugated card, or really build your own tracks. Okay, so these are our track assembly pieces. It is 14 long over here, and that's the number of little squares, and 10 long at its shorter edge. Again, number of squares. Approximately 3 long here diagonally, and that's because, again, because of the nature of the square, of the grid, it is 3 long diagonally. And so that's the roughly the angle I'm using. By the way, you can use the lines on your index card as a way of kind of straightening your piece. That's a little trick I learned a long time ago. So we're gonna cut this. We're gonna let this sit for about, I'll give it about 6 minutes, just like this. Maybe put a little weight on it, and then cut it out, and then the rest of the time that it needs to dry, we'll put it on the clips. Okay, so here are all the parts for the hull of the tank, and as you can see, there's not very many parts. Now, this is the back plate of the track system. Notice that when I first cut it, this is what I showed. Okay, you notice a square end here. That makes it a lot easier for me to cut these angles, okay? But once my back is cut, I then go ahead and cut these corners with the scissor, and then with the file, I go ahead and round it up a bit, okay? So that's what I do. Now, you have to make sure that your skin is completely dry when you make that modification. Otherwise, you're going to foul it, and it's going to destroy the skin, okay? So here are the tracks, and we're doing the simple way for right now. And all I do is I start with a little bit of hot glue, and glue one part of the track, and we're going to see that in just a minute, and then go all the way around. I use hot glue for this bit. However, the crafter can decide to use their super glue instead. Hot glue does have a couple of disadvantages. We're going to go over it in just a second. Now, here's the top hull. The plan is to put the bottom piece here. We can use the grid to guide us, okay? And actually, this goes this way. So we want the skin on the bottom, okay? And what will happen is sometimes you get a slight angle on this side, and this side is straight. That's okay. Through the layering process, sometimes you get sides that are a little bit angled, a little bit longer, and so you get an angle when you skin that part. That's okay. I use that angle and put it towards the front of the tank, so I have a slight, very slight angle here. That when I glue this piece here, everything is straight, okay? And that will ensure, by applying a little bit of heat and bending it, that will assure that you kill some of the memory that this material has, okay? So basically, once I add the track system here, you will note that this becomes much more rigid. So this is the wheel arrangement, and I'm using my nice little beads here that I spoke about earlier. I get these at the craft section of Walmart, but these are optional, and I will show you why these are optional. I take my little stick and just kind of gently push the wheels down just to get straight. So this is another wheel design, and we see how we have small road wheels, we have large road wheels. You can have clusters of more of these smaller wheels, or you can have clusters of up to 8 or 10 even of these larger wheels, but you would have to make your tank a lot longer. That I will be working on the new tracks. Yeah, I think that has potential. They're going to have to be thinner, I think, but that definitely has some potential there as tracks. So to attach my second layer of road wheels, I'm using a little cocktail stick here. Just kind of position it, go through the hole, kind of position it, and make sure this part is straight. I used only white glue. There is only white glue there. That allows me to position the wheel as best I could, and then later I add a little drop right through that hole of super glue to keep it as clean as we can. And notice how I glue the tracks in such a way so that this is the back area that's going to glue to the centerpiece of the tank. So you want this area to be flush as much as possible. Okay, so there we go. There's that. Okay, all parts of the tank are now built. And basically notice how the tracks are opposite each other. And basically, one of the things that I like to make sure is that the tracks actually stand up. If they stand up, then it means that the backing is balanced enough and straight enough that it will glue properly onto this block. And we do want to make sure that everything is straight once we glue it on. So first I assemble my lower block to the H shape of the hull, the upper hull. Okay, and now just make sure this is straight. I use the grid here as a guide. Okay, and I use white glue and then a little bit of super glue mix to glue this together. I don't use hot glue because I may want to adjust the piece to be sure that it's straight, and then we put some pressure on it with the clip to ensure. In the beginning, I like to do it along the edges. I feel that the edges are very important to glue, and now we just put that aside and let it glue. Okay, so here is the tank hull. Now let's look at what we did here in a minute. And here are the two track assemblies glued there by the backing. Make sure you have ample glue. We can use the flexibility of the mesh as an advantage while attaching the track assembly by pushing these two edges forward, inward actually, that way, pushing it inward before gluing. Now I used hot glue. You do have to be careful because if you use hot glue, you're not going to have as much time to position the track, make sure that it's straight, okay? So that is a very important consideration. You can use the white glue and super glue mix and just make sure you bend this inwards a little bit just to be sure everything is straight. Once that is done, then we attach our siding. And again, I used super glue for that and just applied pressure at the edges. You can use a rubber band. That would be excellent to apply pressure to the edges and then let it glue. The next step is to use a little bit of cable tie here for this vent. I apply the top base of the turret and then a little cocktail stick peg which is going to allow for the motion of the turret. Now, builders may want to add whatever they want here. They could add magnets, I mean, whatever you want to make the turret modular. I added the peg. It's a nice old school and easy way to do things. Now, the smoke launchers, I show in the magazine how I make the smoke launchers. And these hatches are made with the heads of these fasteners. That's how I make my hatches. Here we have another example of a hatch, and I use some plastic bit there for the rear of the hatch, and I'm putting a little bit of wire there just to give a little more detail. You can do that in paint. You don't have to do it with wire. I use tweezers for this. Here we also notice the air vents and just quite a few, you know, little details. Now, I show how I made this turret in the magazine, okay? So, okay, it's all layering. I have 4 layers, 1 small layer here, and then 1 longer layer, and I choose whether I want the turret to hang back or whether this might be too back, actually. So let's just put it up front a little more. And yeah, so there we go. So we have 4 layers to form the turret, and then there's this large, basically the main top layer, which is going to go there, okay? And then I have, this part is obviously skinned, and then for the ammunition storage area, it's 3 little rectangles that get glued underneath that section that sticks out. Now for the barrel, this is a 1 possible barrel assembly, okay? And this would go underneath this primary layer, just like that. Okay. I actually drilled a hole with my Dremel, and then that allows this piece to go under here, okay? So it's like that. So that's basically the idea behind this version. Now, you can use a thicker dowel and replace the thinner barrel with a thicker one, which could represent, you know, a more powerful weapon, maybe a howitzer. You can add a thick muzzle here. And for the thickening of the barrel, I just used index card, and I used a little bead up front here for the sight. And that's it. That's pretty much everything else is just optional details. Quickly, before I go, here is a prototype for some walker legs for a bipedal mech-like vehicle, and still needs details, but it is possible. This is a little more complicated, but it is possible to make vehicles like that. And of course, I gotta build the top part of the vehicle. So yeah, mesh can be very versatile. And last but not least is the small vehicles, and these are about 10 millimeter or so, and they have the moving guns. These guns, you know, they can angle upward with a very simple mechanism. I'll talk about that in a future video. I think this is where mesh truly shines, in these smaller vehicles, okay? So I'm going to have 3 of these, and I'm going to be designing some hovercraft, some aircraft. We're going to look at trucks and other vehicles like that, okay? So be on the lookout for anyone interested. All right, folks. Well, that's all. I'm starting to feel a little loopy and not so good, so I think it's time to stop, relax, and I know Julie's is coming down with something as well, so we're gonna have to just relax and nurse ourselves back to health. So that covers the tank hull. More on these mesh projects in the future. There'll be many more other projects to look into. Advantages and disadvantages of this building material. It adds yet another material, another technique for building things, and I'm going to be experimenting with starships. That's going to be, I think, very soon. So for those of you interested, we can see how mesh helps us in building some cool looking little starships. So thank you very much. Don't forget to vote. I will have the poll for the game of this month. That's going to be in the community tab. You can vote there, make a selection. I will have the poll up until tomorrow, Sunday, sometime in the afternoon, early evening. I'll take it down. Whatever game wins first place is what we will play. Okay. So thank you very much, folks, and I'll see you in the next video. And please be safe, and we'll talk soon. Bye now.